Okay, next up is the stabilizer and the elevator and the booms. Now, I've gone ahead and, once you get the booms, the spars put in, you can go ahead and paint it and laminate it. This makes it easier that way. On the stab, it'll be another sheet that's like 4 1/4 by 11. What you want to do is mark off the elevator, which is it's 8 inches long. It's 1 1/4 in. Now, when you cut this out, work from the bottom. This is the bottom of it. You can see the cavity right there. You want to go 1 1/4 up. Now, you want this hinge line, though, to be right on the end of one of these flutes. So if you have to go up a little bit, or just go up a little bit more, it's not that big of a deal. This hinge line cut, this long horizontal one, you only want to cut the top of the coroplast. Don't cut all the way through because you're making a hinge line. The only way you cut through is just the vertical parts of it. That's why you want this back against the rear of the flute there. So when you get done, then you can cut out just the front of it, and it makes a cavity right there and allows it to flex. Then cut your vertical lines, and you're going to have to trim off a little bit on the inside of each one, about a 1/16 of an inch, so there's no binding. Now, of course, is also a good time to mount the servo. The way I've got my servos, I'm using some Emax ES09s. Basically where it is I've just measured in 3/4 of an inch from the end of the elevator, run it up there, and then mounted it up here, up forward on the stabilizer. Remember, this is the bottom. On the booms, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to glue the stabilizer, and I've gone ahead and painted it because this is going to be an assembled piece. On the booms, now I put a little piece of tape there just to remind me which one is the top. If you're not sure which one is the top, just look at them carefully on the cutouts. You'll find one of the top, the edges, just make sure to match them up, is slightly smaller than the other. This way, that's the top. Not that it matters that much. The most important thing is you get them matched up, but that is the top on the thing. On the stabilizer cutouts here, the way that's cut is I have to use just a single hot wire cut, so it's not quite wide enough. You'll have to take a straight edge, a nice sharp blade, and enlarge this a little bit. It just takes just be careful a little bit of work. Try to cut as straight as you can. It's hard to get it exactly right, but when you put the glue in there and then we clamp it down, it'll hold just fine. So now the next thing we want to do is we're going to install the stabilizer in the booms. And again, we'll make sure we're working on the top side. Okay, so I got the top side marked. So how we're going to do this is I'm going to use CA. Try to use CA most exclusively because it works good, but especially on the tail, you want to try to avoid using any heavy glues. Now, again, I've been using this CA that I get from Woodcraft, which is a long application time formulation. So if you don't hit it with a kicker, it takes a little bit of time before it actually sets off, so it gives you a little bit of working time. So how we're going to do this is we're going to install it on one of the booms. Now, the other thing is there is a jig in there. That's what this is. What this is for is this spaces out the booms, and when you glue the whole assembly onto the wing, this fits over the fuselage and spaces it correctly. We're going to use it now just to line up these booms. Measure these booms. If these booms happen to be a little bit less than 1 inch, because the idea is these are 1 inch, 1 inch, and this inner center is 9 inch, and that's how this is cut out. You may have to trim the stabilizer, say if it's like a 1/16 of an inch off, equal on both sides. Shouldn't be. I've got these pretty cut. I think these are some prototype booms, which are like about a little less than 1 inch. Not that big of a deal, but just kind of be aware of that. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to start with the left side here, either right side, either way. But either way, make sure you've got the top mark. And we're going to glue the stabilizer in this side, and we're going to use a triangle. What we want to do is we want to set this in there flush with the tail, with the back of the booms, because the length is everything's what's cut accurate. And we're going to use a triangle to make sure we got this thing set in there square at 90 degrees. And we're going to glue the one side in. Okay, and then we're going to clamp it back here at the back. And then let the one side dry. Okay, when gluing in the stab, just a couple of other things. Make sure you got the top of the stab facing the top of the booms. Obviously the hinge line is on the bottom, so one way to find out. And we're going to make sure to set these in at a 90-degree angle with this boom here with the back of this flush. And we're just simply going to do this with CA. Now, depending on the CA you got, if you got some thick stuff, you should probably have enough time to work with it. Just be careful if the stuff sets up real quick. And of course, you can always use goop or Gorilla Glue if you want to do that. We're just going to apply plenty of CA. I'm going to kind of spread the booms a little bit so we get down there without moving too much of the glue out of the way. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to line this up flush with the back. We'll take our straight edge, and we're doing it here. We'll check both sides. Make sure you're using the inside of the flute, and that's going to be the straight part. And inside the flute. Now that looks good. So once we get that in there, we got this flush back here with the deal. So now we'll take a clamp. You can get these little clamps at Harbor Freight. Pretty handy to have. Get you a bunch of them. And with this in there like that, glued in, we're going to double check. Make sure we got it straight. Put the clamp there. We're good to go there. Can't really do that side. But there. And once we get that, then we're going to let that dry a little bit. Back some of the outside stuff. We can probably fill in. There's a little bit of gaps right there, like there's right here. We'll fill that in with some CA. Get that with some kicker. Same thing with the top. Yeah, pin a little bit of CA. Hit it with some kicker. And we're going to let that dry for a few minutes. Okay. After we got the first boom on there, I went to record putting the second part on there, and evidently I had a corrupted file on the card, and it didn't record that part of the video. So anyway, we have the stab glued to the left side of the boom. This one here, obviously I've already completed, but just quickly how I did it. Once this is square on this, we're going to use this jig in order to space out these booms, and then we're just going to glue the other side boom on. What's important here is when we space it, so you space the front and space the rear the same as 9 inches. And all I did was I glued it on, I flipped it over this way, and I just simply put my glue on the stab, pulled these apart a little bit, then pushed it in there, lined it up flush. This is what's important, it's flush back here, that way it's all square. And then I made sure to use my jig to make sure it was set in at the appropriate spacing, here, here, and just all the way down. And then once I got that set in there, then I just pulled it over the side of the table, took my clamp, and I clamped it down as such, and then let that harden with a CA. The other thing I went ahead and did was I installed a spar. This is a black spar because I'm using some leftover stuff here. Yours is probably white, so you either have to paint it to match. But the spar is cut and it glues in the front flute of the stabilizer. What that does is that gives that stabilizer a little bit of a leading edge.